In this episode, we're talking with Meighan Wells from Brisbane buyers agency Property Pursuit. And we're going to learn what's happening on the ground in the Queensland capital. What impact is the coming Olympics having on the property market? And beyond that, is the construction for the Games draining resources from other sectors? What else could be behind this sustained period of rapidly rising property prices? And is there any sign on the horizon of a slowdown? Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. This is the podcast where we love to talk about the big things in property that never usually get talked about. I'm Veronica Morgan, real estate agent, buyer's agent and buyer's agent mentor, co-host of Foxtel's Location Australia, author of Auction Ready and co-host of Your First Home Buyer Guide.
And I'm Chris Bates, mortgage broker, recently ranked number 5 in Australia out of over 18,000 brokers in the annual MPA Top 100 Mortgage Broker Awards. Before we get started, I need to let you know that nothing we say here can be taken as personal advice. We always recommend you engage the services of an appropriate and experienced professional.
Our guest today is Meighan Wells, founder of Property Pursuit and co-founder with me of Home Buyer Academy. Meighan's Brisbane-based buyers agency has recently celebrated its 20th anniversary, and over these 2 decades, they have cemented themselves as the experienced local specialists. She's seen the Brisbane property market through all stages of the property cycle, I should say cycles, and we're keen to get her insights into the current lay of the land. Nice to see you, Meighan. It's,
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming on The Elephant in the Room.
It's a really interesting one, Chris, because we often are interviewing other people, and now I'm in the hot seat.
You're in the hot seat.
That's it. We'll have to give you some hot questions. How hot is the Brisbane market? I mean, obviously, it's faring really well. You look at listings and where they are, and we're absolutely seeing state migration coming back and moving up there. But I mean, on the ground, given where interest rates are and how tight affordability is in terms of borrowing capacity, what's happening? What are you seeing? Are people, on the ground?
They're buying houses if they can get their hands on them. I'll just put it out there. It's a really interesting time because the last time we saw price rises like this, and I'm talking post-COVID, so backtrack a little bit, our last really big peak was 2003. So we had that really hot run, 2002, 2003, which is when a lot of interstate investors saw the great affordability equation that Brisbane had compared to prices in Sydney and Melbourne. So that was our last really big peak. We've had some peaks since then, 2007, 9, 14, 21. But 21 really is the one that I think has taken everybody by absolute complete shock and surprise. And there's a number of factors, I think, why that's been happening. And, I'm not your data girl. Eliza Owen is your data person. Hats off to her. She is awesome at presenting this information. But from a feet on the ground perspective, the new price peak that we've just hit, which is about $920,000 for a single unit dwelling, is just phenomenal. That's up 16.1% in a year. We haven't seen growth like that. I think, 2003 was about 22% in some suburbs, but not across Brisbane. And that's been about a bit over 55% increase since the beginning of COVID. Now, that's phenomenal to think about.
That is huge. And look, I know for myself, as a buyer's agent, when you're out there on the ground trying to buy houses for your clients, in Sydney, it's obviously very auction oriented. And I know in parts of Brisbane there's auctions, but you've also got a situation where you're trying to make offers on properties that aren't going to auction, and very limited time to get any due diligence done to work out your pricing. And I've hearing from yourself and other buyers agents about situations where buyers are going through on a Saturday, and by the afternoon there's competitive offers and they're going to be sold before the Monday.
Yeah.
And in Brisbane, you can waive your cooling off period yourself by just filling in a form, right, or just writing an email.
Yeah.
So that adds to that level of frenzy, I would think. What is that fair? Like, is that a fair assessment of what can go on?
Well, look, I think it's much deeper than that. I think that is the end point that people get to, that frenzy. But there's a lot of things I think that we need to kind of go back and have a look at before we can even say what is happening in Brisbane. Because that activity that happens at the pointy end, and you're right, hardly any properties are really, I think it's less than 10% of properties are actually auctioned in Brisbane, right? So when you talk about, and we'll get to this later, but That's about 150, 160 properties a week auctioned compared to maybe a Sydney or a Melbourne, which might be 1,000, 1,500 maybe?
No, it's not that high. So on an average week in Sydney, we might be maybe 700 or 800. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot more.
Yeah.
Just not an auction-oriented culture. But if we need to go back about 15 years ago to have a look at what's really happened to get us to this point. Leading up to 2020, when the world changed, there was a lot of rezoning to encourage developers to create high-density developments around the CBD and also around what was termed transit-oriented development. So basically train stations that had also shops and some employment opportunities. Back in late 2019, it was a really balanced market. Like it was every now and then, Veronica, in buyer's agency, we have this time where we go, wow, there's good stock available to buy and there's buyers around, but we've got time to think, to analyse, to make offers, to negotiate. We had that time. It was neither in the buyer's favour or the seller's favour. It's quite balanced. Then everything sort of shut down, changed. We didn't really know where things were going. But in late 2020, Brisbane really started to kick. And it was around February, March 2021 that we really started to see all of the signs of a really strong upswing. So that's really where this kind of kicked off. That was late 2019. So before COVID, it was really starting to kick. And then everything kind of stopped. And then it was September 2020 that the buyer activity went nuts and exploded in about October 2020. And the main reason is, I've always said that Brisbane has this price ceiling. So if you think there was only a few properties that sold over about 5 million before COVID. It was a very small part of the market. Now it's 5 million for a family home. So there's been a dramatic change. And I think the main reason is, I believe that people on high incomes or high income trajectories were largely leaving Brisbane for employment opportunities overseas or interstate.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our brain drain, our income drain, if you like. So people were kind of getting through uni, starting their careers, and then looking for opportunities that would take them into much higher income brackets, and that money was going elsewhere. So there was this exodus of income from Brisbane, and that kind of gave us a ceiling. We just couldn't break through that ceiling. But with COVID, people stopped leaving Brisbane. So they started staying, the work from home opportunities, hybrid working opportunities. And they also came back to Brisbane in really large numbers. So we had expats repatriating, we had interstate migration, which is the highest level in all states since, I think, late 2020. The numbers would tell me, I think it's about 32,000 in a year net from interstate only. So that relocation into Brisbane from the southern states for the lifestyle aspects, affordability, family living becoming more important. And this has happened almost in the absence of immigration. So this is just pure movement around Australia into a very small part of mainly Brisbane.
Yeah.
And it's that big change in people not leaving that has put a huge amount of pressure on the upper end of the market that we really haven't seen before. So that's actually bottlenecking it. They're not leaving, so there's nothing here to buy.
Has that translated into, quite expensive renovations?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So like most people in the country, at most locations in the country, the cost of renovations have absolutely skyrocketed. And, I finished a renovation in July last year, and I think that I was paying a premium at the time. But if I had to do that renovation again, I think I'd pay another 15%, given where labour costs are at the moment. And that's only going to get harder because the Queensland government is negotiating, they're a Labor government, and they're negotiating with the trades that are on site in their projects, in their state-run projects. And some of the increases that we've seen in wages on those projects and some of the things that they're getting, benefits that they're getting, you just can't pay that in private industry. So actually there's this exodus of trades out of private industry into state government projects.
And that would mean that we've moved away from it being just a housing boom in Brisbane as well, though, because of the, borrowing capacity restraints. People can't stretch into the houses because they've gone up in value. And has that surprised you a bit? Because Brisbane always, you don't buy...
Hands off me.
Yeah, don't buy a unit, don't buy this, but...
Oh, that's changed. Oh, wait until we get to units. My God, that is a shock too.
Yeah. What's really happened? Because that is a bit of, have been performing quite well, right? And, that's a real exit of investors where first-home buyers buying. So I guess it's a good thing in that sense.
Oh, there is a lot in that question, Chris, and like I kind of want to unpack one bit at a time. So we've got this problem of not having enough trades and trades being expensive, so people aren't buying renovators. I think the only buying opportunities at the moment in Brisbane are in renovators because you can't get anyone to do anything, and if you do, you're actually going to overcapitalise even though the prices are going up. So it's the finished product, people who can walk in and unpack the premiums that have been paid for that kind of property. We used to say you could get a family home in Brisbane in a family-oriented suburb for about 1.8 to maybe 2.2. That was kind of the sweet spot for a long time for a really nice family home. You can't really get into that for under about 3.5 now. So that's how much that finished family-oriented house in a family, not prestige, just a really nice family-oriented suburb has changed. But the units, let's go to units. Units were an absolute basket case for a really long time. But surprisingly, it was because there was an oversupply and an under-demand. And an under-demand because in Brisbane, you could get a house. You didn't have to be forced into higher density. And people preferred that outdoor living, having grass under their feet. But in about 2007, we faced this massive oversupply of units because no one wanted them. And developers were building a product that wasn't owner-occupier oriented, it was investor oriented. So it was that supply was being taken up largely by interstate investors or foreign investors because they qualified for the Foreign Investment Review Board status or approval. So this oversupply in 2017, a lot of developers just went, you know what, I can't make money out of this. Even though the cost of doing the development was much lower at that time, they weren't getting the prices because they couldn't get that owner-occupier to buy it. But so all of these projects were sort of shelved. Now we have this absolute demand. People are much more inclined to go into a unit because they don't have any other choices. That is literally no other choice for them. We don't have the spread like you have in Melbourne. Like Melbourne could just kind of keep going into those, the west and the north, and it's quite flat, and there's nothing that confines their development. Whereas we have a confined space that we can work in here. We have a large amount of not public land, reserves that you can't build into that actually constrains Brisbane quite a lot. So we have now people who want units. There aren't units to buy, and that's put a huge amount of pressure on unit prices, which we have not seen. You could buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit for about $450,000 to $480,000 for about 8 years. Like it just didn't change. And the new ones actually went backwards. And Veronica and I, in our work with Homebuyer Academy, we've done some analysis on what happened with prices of new apartments. Now, that unit that you could buy for $450,000, you can't buy that for $600,000. So that's in a really, really short period of time. That's 18 months to 2 years, those prices have changed. So it's actually even more dramatic than the house price increases. It's up about 11.2% in a year. And we're not seeing a change in that. I'll give you an example. There's a unit in Paddington, 2-bed, 1-bath, 1-car in 2021, right? So it was in the current cycle. It sold for $603,000. The one next door, same level, same view, same finishes, same layout, absolutely nothing different, $750,000. So it was end of 2021, and we're now looking at you can't buy a unit now for what used to be an entry level price.
Meighan, are you seeing that people are really stretching? Like I guess there was always untapped capacity in Brisbane because people were pretty comfortable. They, would upgrade when they need to upgrade. There's no pressure. I'm on top of my mortgage. But, do you think they weren't really going, leveraging up to the nth degree, right? They're leveraging. People are doing that now, A, because borrowing capacity is tighter, but because they have to. And do you think that there's a natural constraint, or do you think there's a lot of intergenerational wealth still coming, a lot of expat wealth, a lot of interstate wealth that can keep kicking prices up? But the local Brisbane money that's maybe been around for a long time, are they stretched, but you need this next round of buyers to keep coming?
Do you know 1 in 4 houses were bought by cash in about the last 12 months? And I'm hearing anecdotally, right, so I'm not a stats girl, but I'm hearing anecdotally from agents that is higher in Brisbane. So somewhere this cash has come, and I think it's from sale of interstate assets. that is bringing cash into the market up here, which is putting even more pressure on prices because someone who is subject to finance, which is, it used to be surely higher than that, Chris. 1 in 4 cash, that's quite high compared to previous years from what I can gather.
That's PEXA data, isn't it, that you're talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Australia-wide. And so you're saying you think that in Brisbane it's actually...
I think it's higher in Brisbane from talking to agents who are telling me, we had 13 offers. They're still getting 13, 18 offers on properties. I had 13 offers and 8 of them were cash. That's just quite mind-blowing that money has got to have come from somewhere. And I think that it's the repatriation of expats who didn't have an asset, but they have got the financial capacity, or it is interstate money from the sale of properties to come into Brisbane. Maybe they've been renting and now they are cashed up and ready to buy.
Mind you, that's got to dry up soon because you think about it. So. The differential between, say, Sydney and Melbourne prices and Brisbane is getting tighter. So there's not going to be as much cash to splash around when you sell.
Yeah, from the sale of those ones. Melbourne's such an interesting one. I watched your interview with Jared McCabe and even talking to people who have been down there for trips or something. It's such a different town. I lived there for 2 years back at end of 99, 2000 sort of turnover. And the vibe people are talking about now is completely different. So it's really, that's a whole nother, you've done that conversation, but it's interesting. That vibe is now becoming a little bit more Brisbane. So people are now saying, all right, well, we might not have as many of those sorts of cultural activities. It might not have the history and the grandness that Melbourne has, but geez, it's got a great lifestyle aspect. It's got great weather. And
that's
I know you don't like Brisbane. I don't care.
Bloody hot summer, bloody hot.
I will turn you one day. But it is. I think that's the thing people are saying. They can work and have high income earning jobs at here in a hybrid sort of fashion, whether that head office might be interstate or overseas. The imperative to be local to the employment opportunities is so vastly different now as a result of COVID that I think that the lifestyle aspect and the happiness of the family is almost overtaking the career aspiration and that extra 100,000 that they might get on top of their 800,000 that they're earning living in Brisbane. Do you know? I just think it's changed.
Has the return to work, because I've absolutely seen it in Sydney. There's no question that our buyers have been moving and their desirability of suburbs they're willing to move to is shifting as return to work policies change. But I also think they tried to get something close to the city. Now they're willing to go further again. So that's happening. I would say that the interstate to Brisbane's probably nowhere near as much as it was, but then it's it was last year. But have you seen people within Brisbane that, are potentially, going, I moved up there. I thought I could do remote work. I thought I could, fly down once a fortnight, but that's just not possible. Like, are you seeing that people aren't able to get that, or are you finding that now they're moved, they still stay there, and people are negotiating that and just putting their family first? Like, how are you seeing it?
I think it's really different to last time. Last time we saw, I think it was about 2007 or 2009, we had this really big influx of people coming up for lifestyle and saying, I'll quit my job, I'll go to Brisbane, we'll settle the family down, and then I'll work out what to do for work. We saw a big exodus. So that was a free flow in, and it was almost a free flow out because the employment opportunities just weren't there then. Pre-COVID, they just weren't there. They couldn't create this, their own wealth whilst they lived here. I think, Chris, the thing that we're not seeing, and this is where this bottleneck at the higher end of properties is causing a great dilemma, is that people aren't leaving. So we're not, when, you dig down and you try and find seller motivation when you're in a negotiation and try and find out what the real reason is. We were hearing a lot of, look, they're moving back to Sydney pre-COVID. We're just not hearing that they're moving back to in any, it's usually because they're upgrading or they've found something, or it's not because they're leaving Brisbane. And that used to be a common reason, particularly in the prestige market, for relocations and sales.
There's also an expectation of what to buy. You take your Sydney mentality or your Melbourne mentality in terms of what it costs to buy a certain type of house. You take that into Brisbane, it still feels like great value. Yeah, Melbourne's getting a bit tight.
I still believe that you get a lot more for the same money in a similar location in Brisbane.
it's true certainly in terms of city prices, but and often when you're moving from one state to another, you forget that you're buying a different market. You've got to basically take off your rose-coloured glasses and go, hang on a minute, I've got to buy Brisbane prices, not Sydney prices.
Yeah.
And, because you often hear that sort of people from elsewhere, more expensive location, push prices up because their expectation of what you get for your money, it seems like great value, so it seems cheap to them. And so, similarly, I've been talking to Newcastle buyers agents recently, and city buyers are doing that in Newcastle at the moment. And so when you do come from somewhere where you've got more money,
Looking at the value proposition as being still in their favour. Okay.
well, they push prices up because to them it seems like good value, but locals are constrained by their understanding of local market prices, but also B, they potentially don't have the same assets that someone coming from a wealthier city have.
Yeah.
But there's that sort of, there's a mentality around, like you said, $5 million property prices. You would think there'd be just a tiny handful of people prior to COVID that would have considered themselves in the market for that sort of property.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that construction of the spread of buyer budgets, that's been a real surprise. I have to say, it has been actually quite a shock to see how many people have $6-8 million to spend in Brisbane. We just didn't have that buyer pool previously. And it's more commonplace now when you look at the top 10 sales for the week. It is much more commonplace for the cheapest property in that top 10 to be $3.5 million, whereas it used to be quite exciting if there was $2 million houses in the top 10 sales. And I'm not talking about a huge number of years. I'm just talking pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So that is a really big change. Does it make it harder for people to get into the market? Yeah, I think it does, without doubt, because with this bottleneck at the top and no one leaving, that's kind of been how Brisbane's market has ebbed and flowed and moved. And it's why we generally don't have, when we have a peak, it's not a huge one, but we don't have massive drops either. And I'm talking inner city, 10K, 12K radius. I'm not talking greater Brisbane, the outer LGA. It's just the Brisbane LGA. So Brisbane can tend to be, does a bit of a rise and then does a plateau, as opposed to a rise and a fall. This is really remarkable because the length that this is sustained is a surprise. The depth or the how far the prices have gone has been an absolute surprise. But as a team, when we've got feet on the ground, we're always looking for any first indicator of any change in behaviour, whether it's from buyers or sellers. And whilst the team has seen a little bit of a decrease in buyer numbers in the last month at inspections they're going to, there hasn't been a decrease in prices. There hasn't been a decrease in the number of offers that are being made, the multiple offers that are being put on property. So you think about, how many bidders did you have an auction? A big, strong indicator for us of willingness to commit to properties is how many multiple offers are put on a property. And that hasn't dropped off. So whilst buyer numbers might be a bit lower, we actually think that might be a bit seasonal, and not seasonal as in winter, summer seasonal. But Brisbane gets really affected by, the Brisbane market gets very affected by school holidays because most people leave Brisbane for school holidays. And by,
what does that say?
Stop it. It says that we're close to beaches. So people go to the Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast.
Yeah.
We'll turn you one day. So that's, we think that the decrease in buyer numbers is a little bit of a result of the run of long weekends we've had, because we had Easter, Anzac Day and May Day. So this last week was a long weekend as well. But we've also heard from agents, because we're always, drilling them for information. What are you seeing? What are you observing? Are you doing many appraisals? Agents are saying to us that they are doing a lot of appraisals, but no one's hitting the start button. So the sellers are holding off.
Well, I'd also imagine, because you got to think about what agents do to get their foot in the door, do an appraisal, or they entice somebody by going, well, it's been a sale in your neighbourhood, and it means your property's probably gone up in value. You're interested in knowing how much, So there would be a lot of curiosity, I would imagine, amongst homeowners in Brisbane, in a city where, yes, you've had this rapid growth in the last few years, to go, well, what's my house worth now? What's my house worth now? Pre-COVID, I'm not going to bother asking, am I?
No, and during COVID, no one wanted to know anything about what anything was worth. They just wanted to know that they had a roof over their head and they could get the toilet paper at some point from the supermarket. It was a really different mentality. And I sort of, look back at that and I think there were some parts of that I actually think was good for us as a society, that we actually had to stop and look internally and spend some time with our family and have a think about our living conditions. From a property perspective, what it did was make people look at their houses and go, I want something better. And it really has pushed that upgrade market.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with I remember also speaking to you sort of in that lockdown period, and
we spent a lot of time together in lockdown. On Zoom.
We actually created of first home buyers during lockdown. But so this is 2020, and you were the first person that sort of, in a way, was like the canary in the coal mine. You were talking about how hard it was to find rentals. And how you could really see the rental stock drying up, really difficult for tenants looking for new property. And this was, we weren't seeing this in Sydney at all. And I guess there was people moving to Brisbane as well, and you had a lot of people coming back from overseas and whatever. So it was like the first signs in my experience anyway. What is the situation like now?
It's hard. It's hard we had a period of time leading up to sort of between about 2017 and 2019, the rents were going backwards for units and houses. We had periods of time where we couldn't get a property rented for 5, 6 weeks, and you'd be saying to the landlord, the only thing we do is drop the price. It's great property, but there is just no one around to rent these properties. So in that pre-COVID period, the supply was strong enough that people could be quite picky and they could walk away. And you might get one person to a rental open house, you might get none, but you still had to hold them. You go to an open house now, whether it's a unit or a freehold home, and there is still lines of people. There are lines of people. Now, I think the price pressure has dropped off a little bit, and people have come to the realisation that household structure, I think, has been not only have we got this interstate migration pressure, we've got a significant change in household structure. A lot of divorces and separations post-COVID have led to doubling of household numbers just within the existing population of Brisbane. So you go from 4 people maybe in a house to 2 houses that have 1 person one week and 3 the next week as children move between separated houses. Yeah. So we've got this situation. In most cases, the first thing that happens is people go into rentals. They don't go straight into buying a house when there's a separation. That has doubled the number of households and the pressure on the rental pool, whilst at the same time we saw a large sell-off by investors of rental properties. Now, I can talk from our rent roll, our rent roll that I only sold 2 years ago, but I owned that rent roll through COVID. And in the 2-year period post-COVID, 30% of those landlords in our own rent rolls sold. And there was a number of reasons why, but those have not been replaced. So there haven't been enough investors in the market to replace the stock that's been sold by people who said, do you know what, this legislative environment, it's wacky. I don't really want to be threatened by land tax increases and tenant reform changes that tell me that I can't increase the rent and I can't respond to market forces. So there's been a lot of landlords that just went, I'm out of Queensland, but it hasn't been replaced. Those properties largely have been purchased by first home buyers who are traditionally the competitors for investors in that kind of price point. So there's an absolute decrease in the number of rentals that are available. Couple that with multiplication of households of the existing population and the pressure from interstate, and there is just not enough property.
I'm on a personal mission to help more people make better property decisions. And you can find out all about what I'm working on at veronicamorgan.com.au. And there you'll find resources for first home buyers, details about my buyer's agent mentoring program,
access to suburb help for investors, or if you're looking to buy your dream home or an investment property in Sydney's inner west, eastern suburbs or lower North Shore, you can connect with my team at Good Deeds Property Buyers.
If you're thinking about buying your first home, upgrading to a new one, or purchasing an investment property anywhere in Australia, we would love to carefully guide you through this journey and importantly get the finance right. Please reach out via our website, wealthful.com.au.
So that mindset around sharing, a lot of people wanted to live on their own post-COVID.
Yeah.
We had to go back to what we used to do.
Yeah.
We used to have flatmates. We used to share houses. If it was a 4-bedroom house, you have 4 people living in that maybe even 5 living in that 4-bedroom house. So I think our expectation of where we should be at different parts of our lives has changed a little bit. When we got married, we had different friends come and live with us for periods of time to help pay the mortgage, and you did what you had to do because that's what we needed to do. And maybe it is that the number of people in a household needs to go back up again.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think that's one of the next evolutions. Families living together in the housing market. It's kids buying with their parents and their grandparents and multi-generation. I think that's absolutely where we're going. We've got friends who will be buying together and living together. It's what we will be heading to keep the property Ponzi going. But I mean, in Sydney, we are seeing absolutely intergenerational wealth like I've never seen, absolutely. And it's almost coming from not just the kids like needing the money, but it's also the parents giving the money, right? And the grandparents' desire to help. It's sort of shifted a little bit. Well, I actually see you're in a lot of pain. I can see this isn't fair. I can see I'm doing quite well.
Yeah.
I actually want you to stay. I don't want you to leave with the grandkids. And are you seeing that in Brisbane as well, where it's, there's a real sort of desire to really help, and the deposits you're seeing and the ability for the families to enter the market is way bigger than you in the past?
I think so, and I think it is because the generation of parents who have children entering the market now let's talk, so that 25 to 35-year-old is the child, and then the parents are sitting around that sort of 60, 75 kind of range.
Yeah.
They're sitting on golden nest eggs that have been created not only through their hard work, but through the rise in the property market. So, I think about my parents. My parents, most of their wealth sits in the family home, and they can't unlock that until they sell it, but they're not ready to do that yet. So what I find really interesting is going to auctions, and Veronica, you might see this as well, going to an auction and you're sort of looking at all the bidders and you're profiling everyone, and okay, you pick up, well, that one over there, that's a couple, here's on the phone to her. Oh, that's a younger couple, got kids. Yep, well, that's mum and dad in the background, and dad's in the year or doing the bidding, and I actually can watch the parents look at each other when they get to a price point, when the kids get to a price point in the auction, look at each other and go,
yes, we see that.
yeah. And it was like, where is this money coming from? But I think it is that altruistic kind of, I want to help you as much as I possibly can, and I'll work out where to get the money from, whether we sell some shares or we get some equity out of the house. It does seem that there is that capability a lot more than there was when we were a bit younger and trying to get into the housing market.
It's more than capability, I think. I think a bit of it is it's fear-driven. They feel like, oh, I've got to help them because this is getting out of hand, get in now. And so there's this sort of urgency, rightly or wrongly, that is there. I mean, I have actually seen the adult children, where the dad's bidding, turn to the dad and go, that's enough, Dad, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's decide.
It's almost the opposite.
Yeah, no, son, we are successful and I'm going to show,
Got his Superman cape on, coming to save the children.
And they're quite difficult to bid against.
Do you think that's we've got, we talk sometimes about a generation of children that have been raised a little bit like a bonsai tree, like they're kind of protected and they only really flourish if the conditions are really perfect. Do you think that's a flow-on effect from that? I mean, we're going to the psychology of parenting here, but quite possibly. But yeah, I think what are you seeing, Chris? Sorry to turn the question back to you, but what are you seeing in the lending market?
Oh, look, I think that there's massive pent-up demand, right? There's just huge, a lot of buyers, first-time buyers that coupling up, having kids, bought, you know, there's just, they're renting, they're hating renting. So there's just this natural demographics that are absolutely there. But a lot of them, it's a have and have not situation, in fairness. If they've got access to family money, they're getting it. If they haven't got access, then they've got really restricted borrowing capacity, and they're sometimes coming in with the idea, well, I can't afford to buy where I want to buy, so I'm going to buy an investment property. And so, or they're now moving locations again. So they went to apartments and stuff like that, and they're getting pushed out of the apartment. They're going to, you know, just outside of Sydney, or they're moving the state, etc. But I don't think there's just that demographic sort of pent up demand there. The upgraders have definitely cooled off. I would say at the start last year didn't want to upgrade. The start of this year they did want to upgrade because there was the apprehension of, if I don't do it now, I'm going to regret it.
Yeah.
But I think that has calmed down a little bit just with the rates. So what that's in my view is, I think you're just going to see really tight listings the second half of this year, because, you know, people are going to say, well, I'm not selling, I don't want to upgrade when rates are high, and I that gap, I don't want to breach that gap. So that's, and Sydney market's already got very, very low housing listings. So, you know, that would be my take on the Sydney market and what Sydney buyers are doing.
So you're seeing a lot of parents help out in...
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you are actually seeing that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm probably seeing it a little bit less, but Homebuyer Academy, Veronica, I guess if we think about some of those students that are going through and doing the course, a lot of them have just been absolute savers.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually.
And sacrifices.
Yeah, astounded by that. But see, back to Brisbane, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have had sort of different levels of competition over the years. You know, like, I mean, obviously, what's been the reason people might buy there from interstate in past is because of affordability. There might be investors feeling like, oh, I'll get 2-bedroom apartment instead of a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, this the wrong thinking as far as I'm concerned, but that's be that as it may, it's what's driven a lot of people buying up there. And now you've got people migrating up there for lifestyle choices and all the rest of it. Is there a difference in behaviour and expectation amongst buyers? And do I guess, you know, and looking around at agents, I mean, are you seeing a change of the way properties are transacted? I don't know. I'm asking a question. I have no idea what the answer is. It might be it's all the same. But is the way that agents behave differently? Is the way properties are brought to market different?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So what's happening?
Do you know, the buzzword for the last couple of years has been off market. Yeah, it's really interesting because listings are so tight, and agents, that's their job, right? Their job is to find a seller who wants to sell their property, for the agent to list it, to then take it through a marketing program, to attract a buyer, to then negotiate the highest price. That's their job. When listings are really low and the opportunity to sell a property is really low, then agent behaviour changes. And you know, agent behaviour is a really early indicator, as well as buyer behaviour and seller response to pricing. But what we find is, when there's a lot of listings around, we get calls from agents. Have you got any buyers? You know, they've got a lot and they're trying to sell them. But in this market, it's the most prolonged period I've seen of agents not needing to call anybody for any reason, and their entire focus, because the property will sell itself. All they've got to do is make sure that everyone gets a contract, and they put that contract and they make it as clean and unconditional as they possibly can get it. Yeah, for anyone listening that doesn't understand or isn't familiar with Queensland property law, in Queensland, it's not an exchange of contracts. Unconditional, it is an offer that you make on a contract with conditions, if you so choose, and the contract forms or is binding, but is still conditional until your conditions are satisfied. So it's a bit of a different process, a purchasing process. In this market, a lot of people are making unconditional offers, so they're not not subject to finance, not subject to building and pest. It's a bit more kind of Sydney oriented, where it's an unconditional exchange. But the agents haven't got to do much work in that space, except to say to people, put your best foot forward and make it as unconditional as you possibly can. That's all they've got to do to negotiate. What they've got to work really hard on is getting the listings. And so when people say, look, I would sell, but I'm not ready to commit yet, or I have to find something, or, you know, they've got a but, the agent senses an opportunity. What about if I bring someone through? So suddenly they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, which is taking people through a property that they actually haven't got listed, and creating then a sense of commitment from the seller. Oh, okay, well, if they made an offer, would you consider it? Well, yeah, I would. So they're kind of moving sellers through an emotional journey that they're actually not ready to take yet. But because the offers and the sense of urgency from the buyers is so high, the offer is usually in excess of what perhaps the seller might have thought they would get. So this off-market transaction is happening because agents haven't got enough properties to keep them busy. So they're looking for opportunities to get sellers across the line without actually going to the open market. This off-market activity is an absolute change in how agents are behaving.
The enticement.
The enticement. Yeah. Putting it.
I mean, that leads into what I was going to ask you next, which is about volumes, about listings volumes, because quite often things, you would think that prices are high, property's going crazy, then everybody will be piling in to list their property, but it doesn't really work that way. As you say, agents are doing lots of appraisals, but no one's committing. And when the market's rising, people think, I'm going to wait because it hasn't peaked yet, or they're finding it difficult to find whatever they're going to upsize or downsize
Upgrade thing that's stopping them.
Yeah. So that's a bottleneck. Transactions. Do you have any data on sort of how transactions are different, or numbers versus pre-COVID, for argument's sake?
Well, probably the most that I can tell you is that I looked at some stats. I'm looking at a whiteboard, that's why I'm looking away. The last stat that I looked at was probably about, because I'm not your stats girl, probably about 4 months ago, and at that point listings were down 47% on 5 years 5 years previous. And anecdotally, we can certainly say that, and that's listings. I don't know if transaction numbers have changed that much. Number of sales for Brisbane, about 54,000 a year. That was down about 0.5% on the year before. But I don't know what the 5 year figure before that would be to tell you. And it certainly feels like there's a lot less transacting.
Yeah, in a hot market, pretty much everything that gets listed gets transacted.
Spot on. Yeah, the only thing that will cause a property not to sell at the moment, C grade, no-go zone, even those sorts of properties, is price.
Yeah.
That is
that's it. Everything sells at a price.
Everything sells at a price.
Now, the Olympics.
Not that you should pay it.
No, you should buy it, yeah. The Olympics, right? Now, there's been a lot of hype around the Olympics in Brisbane and, it's going to, look what Sydney did with the Olympics back in 2000 and it's going to basically rise prices. I'm a little bit of a cynic on this sort of stuff. But anyway, do people suddenly decide, Olympics been announced for what year is it again? I mean,
so it's been 2 years it was announced. Yeah, we've got 8 years to go.
Yeah, okay. So that's it. Olympics going to happen here in 10 years, now 8 years. Is it having any impact on desirability and prices? I mean, Wollongabba, is it making a difference anywhere except to perhaps taking all the construction staff?
One of the biggest mess ups I've seen in terms of a golden opportunity that could possibly be bestowed upon a city. We have not got we don't know yet where the locations are going to be. So there was some rumours and there was some potential plans put out and there were some ideas. People bought in different areas going, Wollongabba, I'll buy there because that's where, the main game's going to be.
That's where a 2-week celebration is going to be happening in 10 years' time.
What was it that? I remember there was even a politician that bought in that location because she believed that was going to, spell growth. But the thing is, you can only guess where these things are going to happen. So how do you guess where the growth's going to be just off the back of the Olympics? What I think will be good for Brisbane, and this is going to be fascinating to watch, is there's a lot of infrastructure development, both transport and venues and so forth, that needs to be accelerated. We don't have enough people qualified to do the work, to do these projects. So there's going to be a whole lot of people need to come in to help with the construction of these big infrastructure projects. Where are they going to live? So I actually don't think that the Olympics themselves are driving any buyer behaviour to put them in any particular location. I actually don't think I'm not seeing it, I'm not hearing it, we're not getting inquiries for it. Probably earlier days we were, I want to be around, these Olympic locations. No one knows where the Olympic locations are. But you've got to house the people that are going to come in to do these projects. So it actually gravely concerns me that we have a lot of work to do, not enough people to do the work. The work hasn't even been scoped out and confirmed yet. They don't know what the locations are going to be to even put any plans in place. And then where are they going to be housed? So I think that only puts upward pressure on all property types in that greater Brisbane area, regardless of where the Olympic facilities are going to actually be.
Meighan, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but pre sort of COVID, a lot of wealth would leave Brisbane for the Gold Coast and would leave Brisbane for Sunshine Coast, etc. Are you finding that?
Do you mean older wealth, like retirement wealth?
Well, yeah, but people who could commute, or people who, would people to leave? Let's say they were doing well, they wanted to live near the beach, for example, and they were doing well in Brisbane, and they were happy to, they were running their own business and they had that flexibility. They would go there, and there would be a cost benefit potentially. But you find, because those are such small markets where people want to be, that a lot of that money doesn't leave Brisbane? Or did you find in the past people just didn't leave Brisbane anyway? Like, even if they were doing...
Well, what's somewhere else?
Yeah, okay.
People don't commute to Brisbane for work from the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. Even though it's only an hour on a good run, it can be close to 2 hours on a really bad run, or an hour and a half at least. And people in Brisbane just won't travel that. It doesn't sound like a lot in Sydney, and people who relocate from interstate used to think, I could be on the Sunshine Coast, it's only an hour. Well, it's not, and it's an awful hour. It's an hour and a half, and it's an awful hour and a half. So generally speaking, people don't commute from the coasts. And the coasts are a really interesting market because they're the most impacted when disposable income isn't as great as it is in another period of time. So when Brisbane has this, little rise, has a bit of a plateau, does a rise, has a plateau. The coastal markets are much, much more like, the curves. They peak when people have got a lot of money and interest rates are low and borrowing capacity is good, and they drop off. So if you wait, you probably will find opportunities in the coastal markets coming on in the coming years. We're already seeing some price drops in some of those locations, particularly with apartments. So they're really different to Brisbane. And I mentioned earlier, what we saw was the exodus of income from Brisbane to either interstate to work in Sydney or Melbourne or overseas. That was the biggest drain on money from Brisbane, was expats chasing opportunities overseas where they could earn, 3, 4, 5 times what they could in Brisbane and come back with a really big nest egg to then create the family home.
And do you think Brisbane's evolved where they've got, enough new restaurants, it's got enough new vibe, that the people who have lived in the expat life, they're happy, it's not too sleepy? Like, do you think that Brisbane has made that
It's
shift?
a really different city to 6 years ago, and it was already starting to grow up. I guess people say it's a big country town, it's grown up. There's some really awesome precincts in Bowen Hills around King Street. The valley is a little bit better, not my cup of tea, but that's the younger people lifestyle. That the cultural precinct around South Bank is really attracting the downsizer market. So and we haven't even touched on this market, but the downsizer market is probably one of the biggest drivers of construction in the apartment complex area. And the growth that has been in that downsizer apartment market, and I'm talking, 3-bedroom apartments, big, large living areas, large balconies, like a small house kind of size, but a lock up and leave lifestyle. That is a very, very strong market that is hugely undersupplied. And it is around that cultural kind of aspect of being, Kangaroo Point, South Bank, near city, but not in the city. That's a really strong kind of market. And I forget your question now, if you want to say it again, Chris, because I just went off track then. But that's a market that I think is very hard to create product for. because there's very limited land around that. Oh, the cultural side of things, yeah. So, yeah, Brisbane does have a lot more of that now and a lot more opportunity. We are better at attracting international acts, and the sporting culture is quite strong. And I think the venues, when the Olympics when the committee finally works out where they're going to be, we're going to have a lot more of that able to come to Brisbane, because there are limits. So Suncorp, which is one of our main stadiums, there are limits on how many concerts can be there each year and how many sporting events can be there each year, because it is in a residential area. So if we have more of these locations, we can have more of these acts coming.
Meighan, have you got a property dumbo for us?
I do. It was one that we didn't buy, so this is not a buyer's agency client, but it was a property that somebody we did buy for bought their property, another one from another property management company, and it was, oh my goodness, I can't believe they actually bought this property. The balcony was built in, so it was an apartment in around the university sort of precinct, so rented really well. It was nice enough that it was getting a decent, not kind of student rental, but more tutor, lecturer kind of rental. The balcony was built in, so it didn't have an external balcony, but it made the apartment huge. So the internal floor area of this apartment was fantastic, and it was beautifully presented. It was in a nice building, and the way that they'd built it in was not just to build in the balcony, they'd actually taken out the walls that the doors used to be in that took you out to the balcony. And apparently, when they purchased it, they were told, look, it doesn't have approval, but look at everybody else. There are heaps of other people that have done it. Well, we were managing it when the show cause notice came from the council to us as the property manager to say, this is illegally built in. Every owner that had built in their balconies in this building had to take it back to what it was approved and meant to be. So there was 5 months of remedial work. They had no income coming in during that time, and there was no compensation because, of course, they bought it as is and decided that extra space is worth it. But the rent went down. The builder, the disruption to all of the people that were living in that building was horrendous. Body corporate levies skyrocketed through the roof, and that that was just a huge impact. What was so dumb about that was to listen in a property law environment, which is KVM taught, let the buyer beware, do your own investigations. They didn't, and it cost them so much in the long run because everybody else had done it, so it must be okay.
Oh my God, I love that. It must be all right.
Do your due diligence.
There's the lesson. Well, people don't know what due diligence to do for starters.
Yeah,
but also
somebody else should have told me. That's what I often hear at the barbecue. Nobody told me.
But to look around and say, well, they've all done and got away with it. Yeah, I hear people say that, and I go, that's.
When council gives you that show cause notice, you got nowhere to go.
Yeah, what a classic. God. All right, Meighan. Well, thank you so much. That's been a really good chat. It's great to update our listeners. We get a lot of calls and requests to do. Can you just talk about something other than Sydney, please?
So there is somewhere other than Sydney, you guys. And there are other markets that we've been able to fill you in on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brisbane obviously has been going gangbusters for a while now. So there's a lot of interest in what's going on there. So thanks so much for giving us the lowdown.
Lovely, and good to talk to you both.
Thanks, Meighan. Talk soon.
If you have a question that you'd like us to answer in an upcoming Q&A episode, you can send us a voicemail or written question via the website, theelephantintheroom.com.au, or you can email us directly at questions@theelephantintheroom.com.au. If you like what you're hearing, please share this episode with others you feel would benefit. And while you're at it, why not leave us an iTunes review? 5 stars would be great. I know that sounds a bit cringy, but we have it on good authority that every review helps make it easier for other people to find out about us and hear what our amazing guests have to say.